Welcome back, everyone. Those in this room and the people who are joining us remotely. I hope you enjoyed yesterday's program, that you managed to get some sleep, or if you are starting today, welcome to Fiber Festival 2021. Welcome. Feel free to enter the room. My name is Katía Truijen, and I'm really happy to be hosting and moderating one more session in the Fiber universe. So following the main theme of mutation, over the last days we have been discussing topics ranging from more than human metabolisms to xenofutures and how to cope with the idea that, actually of our own extinction as well. And today I'm super happy that we will be discussing in this session, there is no such thing as nature. And we will do this together with Leanne Wijnsma, artist, designer, and educator, and also with Monica Seyfried of Grow Your Own Cloud, who is joining us remotely. Welcome to the both of you. I will just introduce the topic of the session, and then I will introduce you both properly. So when we think about or when we visualize nature, we often refer to something that is situated outside ourselves. We, for instance, say that we go into nature, but we are misled by this persistent nature-culture divide. And by looking at nature as something outside ourselves, we see the planet as a mere backdrop, where resources are extracted to sustain the development of what we could call a hyper-society. But as human beings, we're actually mixed up with other species, and we cannot survive without them. We, for instance, need bacteria in order to digest our food. And in fact, our bodies contain more bacterial cells than human ones. So how to get a better understanding of our entangled surroundings and the entanglements that we are part of ourselves. So while we are living on this human-damaged planet, contaminated by industrial pollution, and we're also losing more species every year, we must, as I also mentioned in the first session, and borrowing from Arts of Living on a Damaged Planet, we must maintain enough curiosity to notice the strange and wonderful, as well as the terrible and terrifying. And which actually means to work against the singular notions of modernity that brought us here. So to live in this time of climate catastrophe begins with a both humble but also difficult practice to notice the worlds around us. So how do we begin then to notice our landscapes of entanglement of bodies with other bodies and the emerging mutations? How do we commonly repurpose existing technologies and actually also new technologies that make visible and the entangled worlds that we have ignored and damaged? So how do we open up to more than human futures? And in this session, we are invited to use our senses and our instincts to sense and tap into the many forms of entanglement and interconnectedness around us. And meanwhile, question old but persistent divides between the material and the digital, and between nature and technology, and how to recognize the underlying technologies that are inherent in our biological systems. So welcome again, Leanne and Monica. We will start with your talk, Leanne, so I will now introduce you and your work. Leanne Wijnsma's practice Use Computer is an Amsterdam-based design studio creating experiences for the senses with smell, taste, soil, and microbes. She organizes workshops and gives talks on instinctive interfaces and prototyping future senses. Leanne teaches at the Design Art Technology Department of Artes in Arnhem and is interim department head at the Sandberg Department the Design Department of the Sandberg Institute here in Amsterdam. And she's recently exhibited at the Venice Architectural Biennial, the Triennale di Milano, Werkleids Festival, and the Science Museum in London. And her work has been published in Times Magazine, Vice, Atlas Obscura, and Design. In 2017, she won the Strijp Award for Creative Technology with her project Smell of Data, which was also shortlisted for the Art and Olfaction Award. And for her current project, Sensing CO2, she has also received support from the Creative Industries Fonds and is awarded a Pioneer Project by SIDN Fonds. So today, Leanne, I think you will tell us more about a wildlife and soil bread, interrogating the life of microbes and fragrance, addressing the fact that while smell has always helped us to survive, it's actually one of the senses that we have ignored most. And Leanne will also share insights from the field trip control Alt Nature that she organized for Artes Design, Art and Technology, exploring the entanglement between technology, infrastructure, and ecology. So with no further delay, Leanne, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for this introduction. I will skip my own introduction, it's really clear. Yeah, so I will introduce two of my practice works briefly. So you have a bit of a background why I organized this field trip. And then most of the time we will go through a field trip that we made last June. So get your notebook ready, because there are some really interesting places that are really all in the Netherlands. So there are really nice weekend escapes. Probably it works with this too. Yes. Next. I like the sound.
That's a really nice sound you got.
Oh. Yes, thank you. Don't know what you did, but magic. Yeah. So yes, microbes. I use them a lot in my work. Microbes are super crucial for the way we behave. And we pick up microbes all the time. So when a new baby is born, the gut of the baby is sterile. So there's no microbes yet. And in the first year, this person picks up most important microbes to build up immune system. And for the rest of their lives, you keep on exchanging microbes. So this is really crucial to be in contact with each other, to be in touch with each other, to shake hands. But in the past years, we became really clean. And this project has started, funnily enough, like a year before COVID. So that is a great coincidence, but also, and that I wasn't able to exhibit this work, and you will realize why. Because what I did is I created hand lotions, actually using sterilization gel, and I put microbes in it. So these were 3 different fragrances: soil, microbes from soil, microbes from yogurt, and microbes from bodies. What I did is I installed these dispensers that we are very familiar with now. But instead of cleaning ourselves, becoming more dirty, and basically infects yourself with some microbes. Because it's also a way to stimulate mutations. Because when we're in touch with each other, we're constantly mutating. And another project with the same goal is soil bread. So this is the bacterium that is present in soil, and it causes actually the smell of the soily smell of soil, the earthly smell. Actually, this smell is also proof that it makes you happy, because it boosts adrenaline, and that's also why a lot of people love gardening, because it literally can make you happy and can fight depression, but it also boosts immune system. And for example, living a bit more dirty or eating a bit of soil, for example, when you buy carrots that are straight from the soil, it can really boost your microbiome. And it's also said, research has proven that also people that do the dishes at home, instead of having a dishwasher, have fewer allergies and other modern diseases. And I actually recently watched an episode about the peanut and peanut farmers, and I learned that the peanut farmers are a bit afraid because there are so many more people with peanut allergies, and so their business might be gone when this trend continues with all of these allergies, and that is exactly because our microbiomes are not fed anymore. So that's why I developed soil bread. So I made these pieces of bread in the shape of this microbe from the soil, and there's actually soil in this bread. This is Streptomyces bacterium, and it's actually based on the same concept of in the past where we started putting iodine in salt because iodine is it's important for us to eat, but it's difficult to we don't usually get enough of this iodine within the usual food we eat, so they put it in salt. So now when we eat bread, it's called baker's salt. There's always iodine in it, and so most people in the world, especially Dutchies, eat so much bread. So we are sure that we get this iodine. And so I was thinking, what if we do the same with bread? Just put a little bit of the soil microbes in bread, so every day we are fed a bit of soil, and in this way it's a two-way function of consuming more bacteria, but also exchanging through sharing the bread and also the hand lotions, of course. So these projects were released right before COVID, so they weren't such a success, unfortunately. But nonetheless, I think it is. It's now that the world is starting to exchange more microbes again. I think it's even more important to think about what hygiene is and what contamination means, and to start building up. I don't know if you realize for yourself, but when I got a cold, for example, during COVID, it was so much more intense than I would usually not take a day off when I had a cold, but now I really had to because I was really sick, because I think for a year we weren't really confronted with new microbes. So it's interesting to think about it, especially in this time. Okay, here we go to control L nature. So in my education, I focus on learning by doing. Most of the world's surface is occupied by cities and rural territories, and it's nature is actually the spaces that city dwellers go to, and I wanted to find out what exactly is this nature and what is the relationship between this nature and these technologies. So I made a route initially through Belgium and the Netherlands, where we had a lot of locations to visit. In the end, we only stayed within the Dutch border. So these places I will show to you. And these locations are all places that are otherwise often stay hidden or are inaccessible or are simply overlooked or hidden, but are really vital to our functioning. And these are, of course, characteristics again that might remind you of everyday technology. So it was really fun. We took our hotel with us. We traveled by camper vans. So we had, our wheels were also our sleeping place, and we found nature campgrounds where we stayed, And also we organized field cinemas. So for example here we see a screening of Alan Warburton's new film, is a video essay that was about computing graphics and algorithms. So it's really nice to watch this in his field, and there were actually cows making noises in the field behind it. Unfortunately, it wasn't captured that well on photo, but it was really nice contrast. Another place that you really should visit is the Waterloopbos. It's a place in Flevoland where Dutch engineers learn to play with the sea. And it's recently opened as a nature reserve, so it's only since recently that you can visit it. I called it the analog computer forest because what they did is the Dutch engineers built scale models of proposed harbors and other hydraulic works like dams, sluices, locks, dikes, and levees, and actually to test how the water would flow and if it would be safe enough. And these are exactly the things that are done by computers nowadays. But here it was done in an analog way. All of these calculations. So before the construction of the real harbor, there was like a small scale model built. So it's really beautiful to see the remnants of those analog computers. Another great example is, of course, the Afsluitdijk. Many of you will know it, but it's still quite far out in the north. So it's worth a trip to drive over it. The dike is under construction at the moment, which is very interesting because it cannot hold the expectations of the rising sea level anymore. This was built in 1927 and 1932, so it's not even 100 years ago. And it has protected generations already from the sea. And what is also interesting that these technologies really change nature. For example, if you look at the map of the Netherlands, you see that the dike closes off a part of the sea, and this is now the Overijssel. The IJsselmeer, it was like, sorry. And this lake was, of course, salt because it was sea, and now it is sweet water. So it's, and of course that changes the whole population that can live in the water. So it's, I think it's a beautiful example of how technologies, can really change nature in our landscape. We also visit the atmospheric measuring station in the great place Lutjewat. It is in the very northern part of the Netherlands, and it's placed here because it's there's not much around it. There's only a small village 2 kilometers away, and then in the north there's the sea. So it's a point that is the least manipulated by cities and villages around it, and they measure CO2, and it's a whole open source database that they share with other European countries to share the CO2 levels here in the Netherlands. It's all done by the Groningen University, and so we went inside to look at the data and to look at all of the amazing equipment they have. So they create really clear insights of the changes of the technological environments within nature, and of course using all of these tools again for it. Another place that's really nice to see is the planetarium in Friesland, in Franeker. It's actually the oldest working planetarium in the world. So it's until today it is it's still very, very exact, and it's amazing how how one guy, Eisinga, built this in his living room while having another job on the side, and he just did this in the evenings in this small living room. And it's it's really an accurately moving model of the solar system, built in 1770. And so it's still a great example for other watchmakers and measuring time and calculating the whole solar system. Then we went on to Rotterdam, which is a really, of course, also beautiful place where a lot of things come together. We went to visit the wind wall, and this wall is built along the Calland Canal. So there's it's 25 meters. They're 25 meters tall, and there's 125 of those blocks along the canal, and they actually block 75% of the wind, and it's only in this way ships can get into the harbor without getting stuck. We all know what can happen today. But it's it almost looks like a land art piece. Very technological, but also to try to be smarter than the Dutch winds. We also invited an artist, Florian van Zandwijk. In this case, he made a film, and so we did a screening onto one of those blocks. So we saw the sun go down and did a screening here, which was an amazing experience. Arriving in daylight and leaving again when it was totally dark. Another commission was Natalia. She did a performance during mudflat hiking. So we went onto the Waddenzee when we could go on the sandbanks, and she rebuilt a microphone on human scale, and she sees bodies also as listening devices, and she built a one-on-one replica of a Rode microphone, and you were able to put it over your head, and you could actually really sense how different the wind, the sounds of the wind. So it was like a dead cat. Like if you're recording outside, you need this shield over your microphone, and now we were able to put it over our own heads. During the mudflat hike, by coincidence, we found silicium. So I was very interested in this beautiful layer on the sand, a brownish layer. So I asked our mudflat hiking guide, like, if he knew what it was, and he was like, "Oh, that's silicium. That's like skeletons of dead, really small sea animals, shells." And I was like, but I know this word, and because silicium, that's exactly where the material that is integrated in computer chips that we use in almost all our computers and cell phones. So it's really nice that during the last day of the field trip, we were walking bare feet through this material that is also in our computers. And the last visit we did in the landscape of Groningen as well were farms, and to see how they use technology. And I think especially at Artes, where we are of course at technology department, that it's very interesting to also think about bringing ecology and bringing ecology in, because I remember when I was in primary school, we had to learn like where does our milk come from, and like these stories really change. And like when you look nowadays in children books, you still see the same images that that we learned 30 years ago, but it's done so differently, and I think it's very crucial for our understanding to know these systems, and also to there are very positive things about it, of course, but there's so many different sides to the stories, as well as GPS farming. So every time when you see land and you see the super straight lines, you know that GPS farming is used. So it's really nice to start seeing those links between the land and technology. Thank you so much. That was it.
Thank you, Leanne. Thanks for taking us on this field trip. I'm a bit jealous, actually. But I think I noted most of the places, so maybe we can organize a field trip after we recovered from this festival. But I think it's super interesting how you show these hidden landscapes that are that we indeed overlooked, but also like how they're engineered, and then how this engineering changes these ecosystems. And I think it's super interesting how you are really designing all forms of exchanges, like between species or between humans, and how to indeed understand our own bodies or landscapes as well as technologies or devices. And I also know that I'm really excited about this idea that now I finally know why we love gardening, because of the smell of soil. I will get to that also later. So thanks a lot. So please remember all your questions that I'm sure you have here in the room or also at home. Before we have the conversation and the Q&A, we will listen to Monica. Welcome back, Monica. I will introduce you before I will give the floor to you. Monica Seyfried is an interaction designer who works across the disciplines of science, ethics, and futures. Her research focuses on living systems and the natural world, like how living systems and the natural world can help us to establish new perspectives on the future of technology and ecosystems. Monica's focus lies in the role of ethics in the design process. In recent years, she was involved in European Commission research projects that explore topics of critical heritages, fusion energy, futures, and ethics and technology, collaborating with institutions such as LSE, Newcastle University, and IT University of Copenhagen. Through her design work, Monica engages at the intersection of emerging technologies, digital media, and a natural environment, creating sensory-rich interactive spaces. Her passion is to build immersive experiences, mixed reality worlds that blend the digital and physical, working with a speculative mindset and experimenting with design approaches. And in her latest work, she has been exploring how design, art, and science, and in particular the field of biotechnology, can create immersive spaces for the creation of new futures. She has exhibited and presented internationally, including at Ars Electronica, at the Biennial of Design in Ljubljana, the Climate Action Summit, and the United Nations and the World Economic Forum in Davos 2020. And she's also teaching at various institutions, including Hyper Island, the Danish National School of Performing Arts in Copenhagen, and CIID. And today, Monica, you will be speaking about Grow Your Own Cloud, a project that tries to bring into light new bridges between how technology could be seen as part of the natural system by looking into the potential of storing data in the DNA of plants and other living organisms. Monica, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me well? Fantastic. Thank you so much for this introduction. It's great to be with you. I cannot see the audience, but I just want to say that I hope you're having a good time, and I hope the sessions previously and in the days back were amazing. And yeah, I'm gonna right now kick off with the presentation about the project. All right, let me know please if you can see my screen.
Not yet.
Super, okay, fantastic. So today I'm here on behalf of the project called Grow Your Own Cloud, which I'm co-founding since some time. This talk will be a little bit about trying to introduce you to how we think about this project, how it came to light. It has its own particular interesting journey, starting from art and then merging into the business. And as well as I would love to also connect to the topic of today's panel. So let's start with that. Let's start with this sentence that the world is a single interconnected organism, which is a sentence that was raised by Alexander von Humboldt, who was 18th century scientist and in quite interesting explorer. At the time, he was famous for being the one that was trying, as the first one, trying to find and explain the fundamental functions of the forest for the ecosystem and the climate, and really claiming that idea that the world is an interconnected organism. And this sort of like stayed with us. Of course, like we have all sorts of different theoretical conceptions of what nature actually is. But this one is sort of how we still can relate to, and we, in a way, how we see, you know, this world of nature still up until now. So according to that German scientist, everything to the smallest creature has its role, and together makes the whole, in which humankind, us, are just really small little bit and part. So we can think of life as a collection of systems. So we deal with life in such way. We encounter and connect with systems at every moment of our life, right? So our bodies are interconnected, self-maintaining systems. Every person we meet, every organization we work with, every animal, every tree, you know, every ecosystem is actually a system. Nature is composed of almost infinite numbers of interconnected ecosystems where energy almost acts as a operating currency in nature. And so, you know, I'm here in a position of talking from my perspective, from a perspective of a curious person that is trying to do, you know, creative stuff. And as many of us, we started to think about nature as, you know, a starting point of what we're trying to build, as an inspiration, as a goal. And we've seen that, you know, following this idea of everything being this massive interconnected system in design, especially, and also in arts, I suppose, we came up with a lot of these different models, such as circular economy and all of that kind of supporting frameworks that could help us constantly think in a new ways around waste, around the way we produce things, around the ways we decompose them, and so on. And sort of like there, in the way we understand now the design is we see the waste as being, you know, something that is not going to disappear, right? Like, we know that there are certain tangible things, such as plastic, that might actually end up in this ecosystem, like nothing will perish. So this is obviously a very famous example of a type mackerel, a type fish, that had an enormous amount of microplastic inside of it. So everything we're producing might end up, on our plates. Everything is kind of circling in that interconnected ecosystem. However, you know, when thinking about plastic, that became lately quite, let's say, obvious to us, at least obvious to people that are trying to launch their own new businesses or projects. But there's something about trying to demystifying the role of technology in that context that I think for us and for the project is very crucial. I think the project Grow Your Own Cloud that I'll slowly start introducing you to is sort of like trying to find this balance between how is technology nature, which bits of how can we start promoting the fact that, you know, it is affecting nature and is made out of nature. So the way we think about it should really embrace that feeling as we, you know, are now comfortably thinking about things like plastic in that way, right? So, you know, for me personally, the simplest example is when I have a tangible things, let's say iPhone, and I look at this very simple graph. I can look at the materials that is made out of, and that can be, you know, that could quickly, in a more, let's say, tangible way, in a more immersive way, could really connect me to that idea that, okay, this technology is really made out of raw materials, and the way I'm going to have to decompose it needs to take that into an account. But there are things in technology that are very much intangible, or we think of them as like in an intangible, this intangible way, that we felt in our project is actually something we want to really challenge. So the starting point of our project, of the Grow Your Own Cloud project, is the cloud. You know, and this is not rocket science. I think a lot of incredible artists and designers really looked at what is the cloud? You know, what is this invisible, fluffy cloud that we're all having at home, that we're all kind of uploading and downloading from on a daily basis? And sort of trying to look, is it really, you know, how this metaphor of the cloud, what is behind it, right? And how is that, can we in a way talk about it as the cloud being part of the nature? And we're talking here, of course, about the data cloud. And so we're actually producing a vast amounts of data, and that is polluting. It's taking up huge amounts of land, and I think the starting point of trying to understand how can we prevent from something that we could call potentially in the future data warming, and yeah, trying to ask ourselves questions: is our data polluting? And you know, if me sitting at home and you know sending the Snapchats and uploading pictures to my Instagram or TikTok and having no sort of endpoint to that, or having no boundary to how much I can actually share, is that a good thing? You know, am I aware that actually this data is causing quite a lot of, can cause quite a lot of damage? Not my singular one, obviously, but all together are, you know, all of the information we're all together actually sharing outside. So a couple of interesting facts. Data centers are 4% of global CO2 emissions. So that's more the aviation industry. Again, we are quite aware of aviation industry polluting, not that much around the cloud. Of course, for people that are into cryptocurrencies, blockchain, and then lately NFTs, which is an interesting space where this ecological awareness also around art really came up, yes, but for the vast majority of people that are using the cloud and data, this is still something quite unexplored. Data centers already use more than 2% of the world's scarce energy resources. This one is very interesting. 80% of data created will never be used again, yet continues to be stored in a cloud. So there's this idea of waste, again, that, you know, for me, sitting at my home in Paris, like thinking that, you know, 80% of some information that I'm storing somewhere, let's say in Iceland or in northern parts of Siberia, is, you know, there. I never think about it as a waste, right? Like it's something that is just hard to reimagine. And so over the last 2 years, 90% of the data in the world was generated, and we're already running out of space. So I just want to break here and ask can you hear me well, and can you see my screen? Just want to check in on the setup if everything is going well.
Yes, everything is going super well. Thanks.
Nice. Fantastic. So this was all like a starting point for the project, and this is where we started thinking about how can we start storing your data nature's way. This is kind of interesting because at that point it was really something that we were exploring from the perspective of art, and we really were interested in launching this new speculative startup that actually has this headline that actually follows some sort of let's say Silicon Valley type of storytelling. It's not something that exists, but we try to convince people that this is possible, this already exists, and you can actually, like, you know, imagine the world in that way, which was quite interesting, and it's interesting that it actually pushed the project into the stage that it is in now. So really starting from this perspective of how can we raise awareness around this problem, was like a starting point for the fake startup to occur. That's what I'm saying. So right now, Grow Your Own Cloud is actually a biotech venture that is looking at DNA data storage in plants and other living organisms. And what we're looking at and what we're truly believing in is how can we find a green model for data storage that absorbs CO2 and can regenerate ecosystems. And so the way we're doing it is actually we're looking at the oldest storage device in the world, which is the DNA, and we're looking at, you know, how can we use that medium to start storing data. Sorry. DNA is an extremely interesting medium. I think a lot of artists as well as a lot of designers are looking at it just because it's really something extremely fascinating. It rarely goes obsolete. It lasts for thousands of years. It could be found everywhere. We know the famous examples of, you know, some creatures and old organisms being found, their DNA being found in really, you know, unexpected spaces. It is extremely dense, and it's a very efficient way of, as a hard drive. So you can store, as the scientists say, you can store all of the world's data in a almost like bucket full of synthetic DNA that is being, you know, that the data was encoded in. So compared to the amount of data storage facilities that we have in the world, is actually super, super, super dense. All of the information produced globally over the course of the 1 year could be stored in 4 grams of DNA. Of course, that's in principle. I think scientifically we're still not there yet to be claiming that this is possible right now, but in principle, yes. And yet it could potentially use and require minimal amounts of energy, just a cool dark space for storage in the fridge, right? So how does the DNA data storage works? This is quite interesting because we take, you know, digital data, zeros and ones, and we sort of like write it and encode it we write it in the language of nature, in the language of ACG and T, the language of DNA, and then we almost, like you can imagine, print this DNA. So we synthesize it. And we almost print the DNA that kind of reflects this digital data. If we want to read back the data from DNA, we just have to reverse the process. So sequence it back and decode it into the digital file. So in a way, we're not, you know, putting obviously the picture inside of a liquid form of DNA, but we're going through this process to sort of like mix match and find find languages that correspond to each other, if that makes sense. But what is interesting in here is that we're moving from a hard drive or moving from a computer-based information into actually having something that is in a liquid form. Like it's literally something you can then do a lot of things with. And I think here's where we really got excited to start working with nature and really start thinking how we can take this step forward and what can we do with it and what is interesting. And I think at the time we were really speculating, can you actually, introduce that DNA that now has some data inside of it into different organisms? And at the time, when we started the project, it was an art exploration. So we were really discussing the ethics of that kind of event. But also at the same time, really talking to scientists and like trying to understand, okay, how can you do it? What are the different ways of implementing data into the plant? Like, what is the reaction from the plant back? Will it keep it forever? Will it reduce it? Not reduce it, but well, basically, would it treat it like a waste? What are the ethics around that whole procedure? And what are the safe ways of doing that? And what are the boundaries of such of such exchange with the plant, right? So we got really interested, and because of that collaboration with different scientists, we actually decided that we really want to go on that route and start working with different scientists and start working with different entities to try to see how much this could shift from being a speculative and an art project that is just, as I told you, it is trying to raise awareness around the repercussions of the data storage. How can that actually shift into being a reality, being something that is a new proposition on the market, which was quite of an adventure. So the way we did that, in terms of like more from more like an experiential and tangible ways, is that we created 2 proof of concepts. The first one was called the data flower shop, and I'll go into the details of both of those in a second. But just to say that the way we structure it is that the first one was really when we wanted to engage with people and really allow for the conversations around that technology to happen. Which actually was staged in a very unconventional way in a flower shop. And the second one is where we actually shifted and really pushed on the science and pushed on what would actually this interaction look like. How can we actually upload and download data from the plant? How would that feel? How much time does it take? And so on. So this was really like deep into the science. How can we develop that whole encoding and decoding process live? Which is something that never was actually done before. So let's go with the first video now. Okay, so in here you see the first proof of concepts we made, which is, as I told you, the data flower shop. It was launched in Copenhagen, where the project actually started. This is the flower shop where we invited people to kind of come inside and learn about this new technology. So at first you would have Cyrus, who's the second co-founder of Grow Cloud project. He welcomes the visitors and really goes through the process of, okay, this is how this whole encoding process looks like. What type of data would you like to store? People would choose, I don't know, favorite pictures of their animals, the poetry they wrote, various of different things. And then, we would go together and pick the right organism and go ahead to take them to the science area where they would, learn about, how can you actually encode that data into the plant that they chose, right? So in here, the entire injection process actually was happening live This is entirely an immersive speculative scenario, by the way. But, you know, we were kind of like going through that whole process with people to understand what kind of questions they have, how do they feel about it, and so on. The most interesting bits from that is that, you know, we understood that, so for example, if people would choose bouquet, they would probably want their data to live in a plant for a week. But if they would choose like a proper small tree, then they would decide for their data to live forever inside of that plant. And yeah, just a lot of interesting questions. Do you want your data to pollinate? How do you feel about, you know, that whole new open source way of thinking about your data? Do you want your picture of the picture of your kid to be just set to cut that the picture? How would you feel about the fact that the picture of your kid could start pollinate and start, you know, spreading around and so on? So just the first prototype to kind of like explore that vision and bring this future into the reality. And I think we can move to the second video. And this is our second prototype that was actually done, I think, a year or 2 years after the first one. This is where we actually used the arts funding to build an installation for a festival called South by Southwest in Austin, in the US, just before the pandemic, where we decided to build a data garden, which is how we call it, the decentralized DNA data storage facility. So the plants that you see actually inside of the installation are the plants that are encoded with data. And we are using here real, like, biotechnological devices to decode data from plants live. And it's interesting, like, this is a completely different prototype. Here is a prototype where we actually worked with apologies, with the scientists, and when we wanted to you know, push on the science as far as possible. Quick note: this data garden was not exhibited at South by Southwest, obviously because of pandemic. 5 days actually before we were able to launch this installation, the festival got cancelled. I think we can go to the next. We can stop the video here, I think. All right, let me go back, share screen. But the data garden had a chance to be exhibited later on, and this year it actually won the honorary mention from SART's prize at Ars Electronica. So we were quite happy that we had a chance to come back to that prototype and launch it for real with the people, so that everyone could try and experience what it is all about. And so, yeah, even when now that I'm, you know, talking to you, I see that I have this kind of storytelling that sometimes is switching from being a bit more theoretical to actually pitching the project. And that's, I'm not gonna lie, that's how right now our life is kind of unfolding with this project, because we decided this year that we want to try and actually build a startup out of this. So we're going to be trying to focus on different R&D and creative applications in the next months to come. And just I want to take this time while we're slowly finishing our talk to introduce you to some of the people that are working currently with us on this project. As I told you, it's quite a multidisciplinary area, and you really want to make sure you have as many voices, diverse voices as possible, really, because it just touches the areas of agriculture, nature, art, technology, privacy, ethics, etc. So if you want to try to be serious about it, or of course, like, art projects are also serious. I'm not saying they're not, but if you want to really like try to grow it and see it happening in the world on a more like, let's say, larger scale, yeah, you want to make sure you compose obviously the team that can help you figure it out in the best way possible. So this is Cyrus, who's the co-founder of the project with me. And then we have Jeff Nivala, who is an incredible research a scientist and a leading scientist at the University of Washington, who mainly works with DNA data storage and is probably at the front line of that technology in the world. And then, of course, we're growing our team and we're welcoming a lot of different collaborators that are helping us to understand, you know, how can we grow it as a business? What are the impacts on the architecture that this technology and this idea could have? You know, how can we design different new applications? What are the best way to communicate it? I think we're very early, like we're just starting this process of shifting into a business, but yeah, we're happy to have all of these incredible people with us. And yeah, I guess right now we've managed to build a small scientific and technical partners community. So we are working across in and out with these different institutions and really trying to learn about biotech and about working with nature as far as possible. I guess the end goal that we sort of sometimes see is like, how can we, you know, can we actually build data forests? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Like, what is a human, you know, how does the human fall into that concept? It's still something that we're, yeah, trying to try to understand ourselves, and it would be great to hear your thoughts. And yeah, thank you so much. Here are some credentials if you want to learn more about the project, as well as my contacts if you would like to, I don't know, chat or support or let me know how you feel about this whole thing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Monica, for your presentation. It's super beautiful, and I'm also really fascinated by the idea of immortal storage, whether in forests or DNA, which I think also resonates, Leanne, with your work on like how our immune systems develop with microbes. And yeah, I think it's fascinating how both your work really instigates or infects us with a sensibility for our entangled environments and technologies. I have one question, and please, audience, I will be back to you really quickly. So have your questions ready. So when we go back to the question of the panel about there's no such thing as nature, or this nature-culture divide, which I think seems like absolutely like not productive at all when we look at all the landscapes and yeah, and the examples that you actually give in your presentations. It seems we also have a misleading common understanding of clean versus dirty, as we already saw in your work as well, Leanne, following like the modern obsession with hygiene, especially now with COVID, or like how you were questioning this also, Monica, and with Data Garden, like dirty data versus clean data futures. Do you feel that we are slowly changing our conceptions of these notions of clean and dirty, and that getting a better understanding of these entangled environments can help to change our mindset of what we may understand as clean? Or do we need new vocabularies at all? I don't know. Leanne, you want to respond first?
Yes, yeah. So, yeah, a clear answer is, I think, yes. Yes, this is definitely changing so fast. And so fast, actually, that we don't, we need time to rethink this and to understand it, and only to be able to make better decisions. And we have so little insights on this. And yeah, I really love the work. Thank you for your presentation, Monica. Yeah, also, yeah, your project now you're starting to make, trying to make really a startup, and very jealous. You will be working with Ginkgo Bioworks. But it's you say it's not rocket science, but I think that is super crucial to start experimenting with the possibilities, and not knowing yet what the answers exactly will be. But also, for example, the flowers. It's so simple, and you bring it home, and then you think about it in a different way because you want to take care of that flower because it's your photo, and your ideas of pollination. It's making it accessible, and through this accessibility, I hope that the audience or is getting a better understanding, because I do really think it's difficult to make decisions nowadays, or there's just so many things we don't know that are happening behind the scenes, and they are really influencing our health, our bodies, our the world, the direct world around us. So I think it's yes, very the answer is yes.
Yeah, I think the way I would approach that question is probably thinking about the future of technology. Like right now, the way we see technology is also in this super hygienic way, right? Like we don't want to get dirty. Like we want to have the Skype call and have the cleanest experience possible. We don't want to think about all these cables running in normal natural environments, obviously. And just if you go through also, the way bigger companies are promoting technologies, always in that way, everyone will hear you and everything is so clean and you don't really have to, do much, and you're not going to have to make yourself dirty. And I think that's why I'm fascinated about biotech, right? Because biotech is progressing in such fast way, but it's also going to introduce us to these similar interactions that we are achieving through using the existing digital technology, but really using normal materials such as soil, such as flowers, perhaps, such as pollination, such as air, etc. And is that clean or dirty? Like in that way, I think that will introduce us to more. It will be more dirty interaction, but in a way also more clean, because that's, for humans, that's our normal environment. And in terms of typologies, or thinking about if we need more, expand on our vocabulary, definitely, because I think it's like with death and birth, why in nature, one lives with the other. I think when building technologies, dirty things are coming out of clean ones, and etc. So definitely there's this whole gray areas that when we start calling things like, this is clean technology, this is dirty, even though I'm doing it in my own project, I'm not sure if that's the way to go in the long run.
Yeah, and and then also, following on that, I think it's interesting how digital technologies, on the one hand, seem to weaken our senses sometimes, also referring to how we sometimes forget about the sense of smell, but then also how they allow us to mediate or tap into our surroundings. And is that a paradox or not? Or who's first? Leanne.
I do really think we won't forget about it. We will be surrounded by it, but I don't know. It's a bit of a two-way thing. It's a complex matter. I think it best would be if it's a bit more like in symbiosis, and that that they could really live together. And I think it's also it depends per person that how they could work together. Smell is of course a thing that that's really difficult to be aware of. But once you're confronted with it, you really know. And there's only a few people that can imagine smells. I don't know if they are in our audience, but if you try to imagine like I don't know, the smell of roses, like there's very few people that can smell it, and that's different with images or other technologies as well. And that makes it really unique, and also, of course, very exciting to have them work together, the senses and technology. But what role this would play in the future? That's so difficult to say, of course, but very exciting to think about, and but definitely to create space for these senses.
And how do you feel about this, Monica? Or do we need to broaden our understanding of technology, as I feel you're also doing throughout your projects?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think, we see that this idea of how we interact with technology right now is sort of like very visual, and we don't tend to to actually use other senses. At the same time, I'm thinking, but we actually do, like technology is just conditioning us to use this one particular sense of a vision, let's say, but actually the other senses are also accommodating to that interaction as well. And is that good or bad? I guess it would be better if we could really start using it in a more broader way, in an organic way. And I guess again, like the choice of going into the fields of biotechnology for me is one of, like, that's one of the reasons I think in there we can actually create interactions that will look at other senses and perhaps lighten so much weight on our vision, and really introduce these new ways of interacting with the world around us. So it's a new field, fun one, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, and maybe coming back also to the main theme of the Festival of Mutation, I think in both your presentations we find examples of mutating organisms or processes of mutation, and I was wondering, if you could tell a bit more about that, and also maybe what we can learn from when you are observing these processes.
Yeah, so for me this is, talking about the theme of this festival, I really see the human body as the center, that we are mutating ourselves with all of the new diseases and allergies we're confronted with. So I think that's very interesting to see how we can also, we can design those mutations. We can direct them and think, and now, we're doing all kinds of things because we think we want to be super healthy, but it actually, turns out differently, working against it. And so in that way, I think it's always very interesting to zoom out, to not only think about like what happens here and now, but also, what is the influence like on the rest of the world and other human beings. And and I think it's interesting to not see it as like a binary thing. Like mutations are not like good or bad, or it's hygiene is also not good or bad, or it's but I do think it's interesting to promote those mutations and to think about how can we use them, and what would be good for you is maybe not good for me, or but that is I definitely think it's crucial to be open for those mutations. Yeah.
Yeah, and how is that for you, Monica?
Yeah, it's very, very challenging topic, I think, for me. And just because I'm working on a project that mutates plants, right? And the very idea of understanding waiting, is that a better decision than storing, let's say, data in a conventional way that we found so far is better or worse? If alternating nature in that way is better or worse than the existing ways, how much consent that the plants have, you know? And because I'm in the power of mutating it in a way, yeah, it's just a very big topic that constantly I'm trying to explore and think about. And I think, yeah, it's about trying to go through, for me, through this process of, yeah, these big questions in decision making, like which one is better or worse? Like, what is the mutant that we're proposing? Yeah, as I told you, a better one, or is it something that will really disrupt a lot of things around us, right? And I think one more thought is, like, I think more and more mutants are actually coming to us, and they will completely kind of shake and change the way we look at legacy around that, the way what kind of new organisms we're allowing into our spaces. So yeah, that's sort of like where my head is around when it comes to that topic.
Thanks a lot. Are there questions from the audience? The one in the back.
Thank you. Hi, I just have a question or more of like a reflection for Monica, kind of leading on from what you said about consent, because I was wondering, the Data Garden project, it seems like it's a relationship between the plants and the human that maybe is not mutually beneficial, and I just wondered, that the human is getting something out of it because they can store data, but is the plant getting anything out of it? And how does the plant maybe feel about maybe being this storage center?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would love to hear actually your thoughts on that as well. Like how you would also feel about that relationship. The way I see it is that the plant is receiving care and a space to grow, and a space to be from the human. But yeah, definitely, like the human is sort of like using it in that, in the way that you just described. So the boundaries of the consent are very blurry in that interaction. But I would love to hear if anyone else has some thoughts on positive or negative relationship in that matter.
Anyone in the audience? Yes, who wants to respond?
I was just wondering, how important is it that the plants are alive for this storage process?
Good question. Well, it's better if they're alive because they're contributing to our ecosystem, right? They absorb CO2, and they can, still be working in their normal manner in a way. So it's extremely important that they're alive. In principle, thinking about technology itself and the science itself, they don't have to be alive. They could be stored in a raisin, they could be dead, and as long as they don't perish and decompose themselves completely, actually we could still be able to retrieve data from them.
Yeah, maybe jumping back to the question on consent, I think it's very interesting to think about because as a biotechnologist, we don't ask ourselves whether they want to be transformed or not.
Nice.
But I mean, as a human species, we generally don't ask nature about for its consent. We destroy ecosystems, we slaughter animals, right? I would be very interested in whether you know any examples of projects which actually try to obtain any kind of consent from nature, whether it's a highly a smart species like dolphins that can actually communicate to some extent, or any other life form.
Yeah. Maybe don't have anything on top of my mind. Definitely have a lot of things in my notebooks that I would think of. I would have to have a moment to think about it. But what I can say is that it's always blurry, right? And it's really hard to establish where you actually achieve like the right collaboration with nature. It seems like each time you're interrogating, there's always going to be some fallback. So even if you're trying to protect one species, you probably by that interaction will put other species in danger and so on. But I'll think about the projects that I value the most that are balancing that space nicely. Sorry that I don't have it out of my pocket.
Thanks for the great questions and for your answer, Monica. Are there any other questions or comments? I see one over there. Hello, Jarno.
Hey, I'm Jarno. I just want to know, does your DNA live in space or would it directly die?
What? Again, if it lives in space?
Imagine you would send your plant into space. Could it reach another galaxy?
Well, question. I love this project. Always brings these questions that are very, very interesting, of course. But it has the I guess so. I mean, look, if you can grow food in space, which you can, then it's just a matter of providing the right material, the right environmental conditions, obviously, for the organism to grow. So whether it is in your dungeon or whether it is in the space, I suppose doesn't matter. You just have to have a good infrastructure that supports it, right? But I have not run any research on that. Would be great to do it. So one day.
Many future projects coming up as we speak. I think we have time for one or two more questions. Yahoo.
Thank you for the wonderful presentations. I was just wondering, could you give maybe us, like in people that are interested, professionals, designers, artists, sort of an advice how to work with these living systems? Like, could you give us like, do we need to spend more time with them? But what are critical kind of thoughts and modes to work with these environments that you both work in, that you maybe give us to take home?
I do think your suggestion to live with them is a really good one. But I think the main thing is just to be open and learn a lot and accept that you don't know anything, and that it is fine, because that can help you in like approaching others and to work together with others. So for example, in my projects, every time I start to work with something completely different. So first I started working with soil, and then after a couple of years, I felt like kind of a tunnel or soil expert. Well, expert is of course too big of a word, but then I started working with smell, and I had to really start from scratch again. And somehow, and I'm still super excited about it, but then you go to something else. Now I'm working more with taste and microbes, but it's really nice to know that I actually don't know much about those things, but to just indulge in the information that is there and to learn about like all of the new developments, and be critical towards it. I think it's really nice to come into those topics as an outsider, to really see it differently. So often I speak with the real experts, and they're like, oh, but I've never thought of this, and I think that really helps in understanding it for yourself, but also to make that translation for the audience, because it makes it way more approachable. Because I'm not an expert, and I will have to communicate it to a lot of other non-experts, and that often helps. Rocket science is often so like high up there that I think artists and designers can really be that bridge, for yourself, just to learn a lot and experience new things, but also as a bridge, as a translator.
Yeah, I don't know, Monica, if you also wanted to respond to Jarel's question.
Yeah, sure. I think I think I have like 3 points. The first one is definitely get out of the office, get out of the conventional ways in which we work as creative people, designers, and so on. And if you're trying to work with nature, be in nature, but not being there just visiting. When you have a creative process, if you have a possibility to run it in nature, do it there, because it's all about, in the end, it's all about you also gaining that humble sense towards it, right? That will always help you with better decision making you're going to have to do along the way. You have to observe it, you have to understand how it works, and it's really hard, I guess, to do it through videos on YouTube and through understanding hardcore paper scientific theory that is amazing and it's out there. But we always, try to start with that. I would say, like, be close to nature as much as possible. And then I forgot the second point, but the third one is whenever you're ready to take it to the next level, just because you're working with nature and because humans just really misinterpret it and use it in such like obviously disastrous way, try to not follow try to not follow the ways things have been done so far, in a way. That's a very ambiguous answer, but there's something in there that that I think it's important. Try to find just really new ways of looking at this whole field.
Practice humble attitudes. We have time for one more question. Yes.
Hi, thank you for the presentation, because when you were talking about the image of the smell of a rose, so I wanted to ask, could you share with us how do you illustrate the smell of nature in your head?
It's a great question.
How to describe the smell of nature? Well, for me, it's soil. For me, it's soil, because that's where it starts, and that's also where the nature comes to us, because the food we eat grows on the soil. But then if the soil is micro-bridged, then also the food is healthier. So if there's monoculture, for example, it's the soil becomes really dead, and then it's like kind of this whole circle, and that's why this smell is so crucial. But also, different kinds of soils can smell so differently. So a project I did 10 years ago, I was like digging tunnels in different countries, and I always took a jar of the soil home, and then when I opened the jar at home, I could really tell if this was Italy or South Africa or Amsterdam or So that's crazy how so many different soils can smell so differently and can pull you back to that certain place right away. So for me, yeah, soil is really a binder of like what that's, yeah, I think that's where nature starts for me.
Maybe just the last thing to keep on thinking about, coming back to the topic of the session, how you're, yeah, like through all the examples that you showed of hybrid environments, and how do you think there will be at some point a moment where we should get rid of the concept of nature or the concept of technology at all? How do you feel about that?
Yeah.
Monica.
Can try and answer. Yeah, I think I'm following like the last the last question, the previous, the one that was answering. Like if we treat nature as a goal always, like the things will work well for us. And then in here, I would love to try and live in the world where for, I don't know, like 1 year, we are not using the word technology at all. We're just using the word like nature, you know. So, and for any device or for any interaction we're doing with the digital world, we try to use some new language around nature. I think that could be very confusing because obviously as people, we love to put things in boxes, and it's good. It helps us progress and think about stuff more logically. But at the same time, there's something about technology that is, it's perceived to be too far from nature, in my opinion. So maybe having this radical shift could be super interesting.
And what do you think,
Leanne? I agree. I agree. I think yeah, it's difficult to get rid of the word nature. Yes, also Monica says. I think it's what gets to people. Like it's what we need, and we know we need it, and it's precious. But it would be yeah, it would be interesting to think like, okay, decide now. Okay, nature doesn't exist anymore. It's technology. It's all designed and controlled. But I don't think it's a clever idea. Maybe it will only go downhill from there. So yeah, I think it's good to stick to it, but just to realize that there's yeah, different forms of nature. Yeah.
Okay, so we have to be careful. Yeah. Okay, I will try to maybe wrap up this session with some of the notes I took. I think, Monica, it was really beautiful how you are also trying to demystify technology and how devices are made up of natural elements. But Leanne, also how you are bringing us, for instance, in a field trip to all these obscured or overlooked landscapes, like automated landscapes of contemporary dairy farms or data centers. Also coming back to your work, Monica, on data and data warmth. And so, yeah, I think we learned a lot about how to train our senses and our instincts, and like attuning to the idea that the world is a single interconnected organism. And I noted some methodologies that we can hopefully practice in the next few days and weeks and months and years that we hopefully have ahead of us. So 1, infect yourself with microbes, and hopefully Leanne will give a lot more workshops and will make beautiful work on this, so we can continue to practice that. We have to take on more collective field trips, I think. Jaro, maybe something to take on as well. Let's find new ways to store our data, and meanwhile become gardeners and promote mutations. Yes. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thanks so much, Katía.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Leanne, and thank you, Monica. Thank you to the technical team and the entire team of Fiber Festival, Jaro and Ryan and everyone. So thanks for listening and staying with us. In this room, we will be back at 4 p.m. with a 6th session, which is called Mutant Myth Worlds: What if stories could challenge the fabric of our existence? And this will be with Sae Rayal and Ibelis Gardia Ferragutti, and it will be moderated by the amazing Shiloh Phillips. Happy birthday, Shiloh, wherever you are. For those of us who are tuning in remotely, there will also be the mutation stream, again, with videos and films exploring the boundaries of familiar and unfamiliar realms. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of the festival.
Oh,